We are at a seminal moment in the cryptocurrency world. A crypto company called Tornado Cash has stirred up some controversy. A protocol called mixing has been tied to the laundering of allegedly $7 billion. Now, the punitive sanctions have raised many questions about government control versus privacy rights. My next guest, Al Morris, is a blockchain veteran and co-founder at Koii Network, who can help us shed light on this important debate. Al, welcome to the Daily Drop.
Happy to be here.
All right, let's get right into it, because I know that you're good to go. $7 billion was apparently illegally laundered through Tornado Cash. How responsible should they be?
Well, so Tornado Cash is software. It runs completely without any centralized control by anybody. There are people who wrote the software and they deployed it, but the people who are using that software to launder money are the ones that are at fault here. And if they're criminally liable in any fashion, then that is the problem. The actual software itself has no centralized authority behind it, and it is running completely on its own. And it really just does what people tell it to do. So the customers, in this case, would really be the ones that should have any fault blame on them.
Okay, well, I think I know how you're going to answer this one then. So the U.S. imposed very strict sanctions on Tornado Cash. Do you think they were justified in their punishments?
I think it's a bit of a mixed bag there. These same kinds of technology that are used to obfuscate the trail of money can be used by political dissidents or even journalists in different countries who are trying to accept payments for doing really, righteous work. The question is everyone that was involved in Tornado Cash or ever touched that contract actually at fault here? And I think the kind of grand sweeping gesture that's been done here is really kind of an overstep. And probably just a sign that the regulators and the authorities in this case don't really understand what's happening or don't have enough of a grasp of how this technology works.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. How would you differentiate then between the different people? If you know there's a protocol that's being, let's say, abused, right, for legal purposes, what is a more sensible option?
Well, I mean, you could say the same thing about people who take money out of an ATM, right? I mean, a briefcase of cash is the classic way to launder money. It's probably what the vast majority of money laundering actually goes through. But we aren't stopping people from using ATMs either, right? So in this case, actually there are tools out there at the moment that allow you to track cryptocurrency through a wide variety of these different types of tools. And most of the time, the authorities have the ability to track those things. They just haven't actually used the systems that are available to them. There's a number of products out there that allow you to trace all kinds of things, even through something like Tornado Cash, because just because it's a mixer doesn't mean that you can't see the money going in and out. So just the fact that somebody's used it.
And let's define a mixer for our audience.
Sure. So a mixer is what's called a smart contract. So a smart contract is completely unowned code. It runs all there out by itself on the Ethereum network, and you put money in. And then the money is cycled around between a number of different wallets. And after that, it can be withdrawn. This is not the first case of a mixer. There's other currencies like Monero that have been doing this for at least a decade. And these things have been around and running kind of completely without any one person actually managing them. These are not technology companies. These are actually just completely unowned software. They're totally outside the control of anybody else. They don't actually have anybody that's running them. In fact, the people that wrote the code in the first place and deployed it and maintain it often are not even really involved in using it in many cases. So many of the people that are being sanctioned here really probably have very little fault at all.
So you actually hit upon my next question here. Do you think that the Tornado Cash consequences will affect the other crypto mixers, other protocols involved in the privacy space in the blockchain?
I mean, I think that the gesture here by the government is clearly meant to kind of discourage the use of these types of technologies. But in a broader sense, I mean, a mixer is just one type of a technology system. And in this particular case, we're talking about currency being moved through it. The same exact technology can also be used to obfuscate the trail of information and say that you are a journalist or someone that's actually trying to say something that isn't supposed to be being said in a particular country. You could use this exact same type of technology to transfer information and to obfuscate the trail of where it came from. And so a lot of this type of technology has been designed to mostly preserve the privacy of individuals, just because some people decided to not pay their taxes and hide their money using something like this, or that a particular nefarious organization decided to use it, doesn't mean that the core technology itself is flawed.
Look, we have 30 seconds before we go to the break. We're going to talk more about privacy, but do you think that privacy, I don't know, do you think it's the most important issue in the space right now?
I think one of the main reasons that decentralization is becoming quickly something that people actually want to use is that it allows these kinds of privacy systems to exist in the first place. The traditional internet that we now have was originally designed as a Department of Defense technology in the US, and it is quickly.
Let's pause. I want to get back to this because I don't want to. I want to rush this. You're making really intelligent points. Let's go to the break, and we'll be back on the Daily Drop. Welcome back to the Daily Drop. Look, a major debate has emerged in the blockchain community. Do you believe that Web3 companies have the right to privacy?
They certainly do. And actually, I think what we're talking about in many cases here is that these aren't necessarily even companies. They're basically autonomous software. So there's not someone that is currently managing them. There's not somebody that can see inside the books. Everything is, in fact, completely transparent and on a public ledger. So the reason that Web3 exists in the first place is that the traditional internet was not designed to preserve privacy in the way that you and I think about it. In our day-to-day lives offline, we have the ability to close our doors, put our shutters across the windows, and we have privacy. It exists in our lives. The internet and even modern telecom in most cases does not really have this. And that's a gigantic flaw. That's why Web3 was created in the first place. It's meant to be a system that allows an individual to do what it is that they want to do without having scrutiny. And this is possibly something that's dangerous, but it's also something that we desperately need because the internet never really came to actually satisfy that need. That's why this whole industry has been created.
So you said something very interesting. You differentiated very clearly between the code and companies. Can you tell me why that's so significant?
So with a blockchain system like this, we're talking about the Ethereum blockchain in particular, there is a decentralized network of computers that are running code, and they all run that code in a completely trustless fashion. So no one here is in charge of Tornado Cash. No one is designing a system where somebody's going to log into Tornado Cash, make an account, send money to some company somewhere with a wire transfer. This system runs autonomously, which means that Tornado Cash is a piece of code that was written quite a while ago, actually, multiple years, and is just sitting there out in the open world and just doing its job. And the people that interact with Tornado Cash can use it in any fashion they like. But that doesn't mean that Tornado Cash itself or the people who contribute to that code base are meaning to do anything nefarious with it themselves. This is entirely outside of their control at this point. And so to sanction these people is effectively to blame them for something that someone else did using a technology that they provided basically for free.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the privacy of citizens. So we see regulations around the world. They appear to be targeting the privacy of citizens. Do you think it's justifiable to target identity in the blockchain space at all?
Well, and you have to kind of step back from that to understand that like authoritarianism around the world is rising much faster than it ever has been. Since the beginning of the internet, we've mostly been in a pretty peaceful part of history. And as this part of history is kind of eroding, we're starting to see more and more journalists being prosecuted. I mean, in multiple countries around the world, we live in a very civilized place out here in Canada and North America, but there is a gigantic need for technology that allows people to protect themselves. And this technology doesn't have an owner. That's the entire point of these things. So the reason that we've created autonomous code is because we need autonomous code in certain cases. And to prosecute anyone that ever touches it or anyone that helps to create it seems to be sort of a slap on the wrist intended to discourage that kind of behavior without even fully understanding why it was done in the first place. And it's absolutely necessary that our internet evolves in this way. That's why Web3 will come after Web2. That's why it's quickly becoming the only thing that software developers want to work on.
Look, I don't know if you are a lawyer or you went to law school or something. You're an excellent debater. But okay, like I have a more provocative question for you though, right? Because many rug pulls and scams, have been perpetrated by anonymous and pseudonymous entities in the blockchain space. I mean, we can agree on that. But do you think that restricting privacy could make the blockchain space safer?
I don't necessarily agree with that. In fact, actually, a lot of the things in blockchain, especially even Bitcoin, were created pseudonymously. And so there's really not actually ever been a situation where a rug pull happened because of someone who pseudonymously created something or did it without having their name attached to it. When a rug pull typically happens, it happens because someone didn't look at the code base and the autonomous code that was deployed had a backdoor in it that allowed somebody to drain the funds. Or what someone's done is to create some kind of an investment scam, which usually they take advantage of people who don't have enough information. So in the past, I actually started a company in Chicago called We Teach Blockchain, where we taught seminars on how to use these technologies in a safe and reliable way. And if somebody comes into this ecosystem and knows how to properly approach things and has access to the right information, there is very little risk that any pseudonymous entity has any more control over you than any individual on the street would, because it's about making your own decisions and being safe in that way. So the idea that privacy somehow protects the end user in these systems is, or a lack of privacy rather, protects the end user is almost laughable.
So, okay, look, we only have 30 seconds. I don't want to ask you a long question because I know you're going to have a brilliant response. So I'm going to get to that after the break. But do you think that it's more important to target the code than the people? Is that what you're saying?
The absolute opposite. So the code itself is autonomous and has no malice. The people using that code may have some potential issues. They might be using it nefariously. But if they are doing so, if they are laundering money, there will be another paper trail.
Let's get into this more because I want to understand this more. We're going to break on the Daily Drop. Okay, so I really want to understand, because we started talking about this before the break, but I really want to get into it so I can understand, so our audience can understand, because I do think that this is the crux of the whole argument here, right? So we have these sort of like nefarious things that have happened, and people are sort of blaming the pseudonymous entities, and then there's also some talk about the software. Can you explain again who really deserves the blame here? The code, the people? What do you think?
So in this situation, specifically with Tornado Cash is a piece of software, not a company. It exists autonomously. The software was deployed for a very specific purpose, which is to protect the privacy of people who use it. If someone uses that privacy that they're gaining from using Tornado Cash to do something that is against the law, that is the individual's choice, and that action is their decision, which they can actually still be held accountable for in many other ways. If somebody decides to hide their money from the government and not pay taxes, if they do something that is nefarious, like potentially laundering drug money or some other nefarious entity's money, that money will show up somewhere. They will buy a house, they will buy a car, they'll buy an island somewhere. They'll show up with a passport and they'll go and purchase something using that cash. That doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Tornado Cash. You can still prosecute that kind of behavior. It's just a little bit harder. So what's happening here seems to be sort of a shortcut or perhaps laziness by the authorities that is them essentially choosing to avoid actually fixing the problem at hand, which is that they're not able to prosecute these people, and instead trying to shut down an entire generation of technology as opposed to actually trying to understand it and actually go through the nuance. And that's not to say that there aren't people at the FBI or the IRS or these organizations that understand what's going on here. It's just that this particular action seems to be a very kind of heavy-handed choice and potentially could cost them a lot down the line. It's going to set a very bad precedent in the future.
I agree, but I will say, I'm going to push back a little bit. So you do agree, obviously, that money laundering should be punished.
Yes, absolutely. So it's against the law, period. And there's very good reasons for this.
Right. So at what point then does it make sense to target the people responsible? And again, I don't know the answer. I'm not saying you should shut down Tornado Cash. It does seem a little bit extreme. But do you think that you should wait until the money has been laundered and then they catch them after? Like, if you know there's going to be a lot of money laundered in one specific place, doesn't it seem a bit logical that that place should have some sort of sanctions, some sort of regulations?
It sounds like they should prosecute certain island nations that help money laundering along the way. The same logic could apply to an enormous number of tax haven countries and all sorts of other places like casinos that are used to launder money. Laundering money has been done for centuries at this point, I'm quite sure. And no one has ever tried to shut down certain casinos that do this kind of behavior. But in this particular case, where we're talking about trustless autonomous code, the code itself is not at fault. The people who contribute to that code base are not at fault. The people who have chosen to use that thing in a nefarious way are the ones that have committed a crime. And to sanction every single person that's associated with Tornado Cash is essentially to say that every single person who's used Tornado Cash is involved in money laundering, which is simply not true. There are tons of other reasons to protect your privacy when transmitting money online. There are even many more reasons that this could actually cause people who are trying to do something good where they need the privacy associated with that. who probably are actually trying to do something quite reasonable, where they simply don't want to have that paper trail because it's going to get them into legal hot water with a government or another entity, which is why this technology exists in the first place. Those people are the ones that will suffer from this behavior. And so this heavy-handed gesture by the government will most likely result in actual people who have done nothing wrong being harmed, which seems to me like even more of a crime, to be totally honest. It seems like almost laziness.
Well, look, you argue very, very persuasively, and I think our audience is going to love this episode. But okay, let's ask about the protests, because there are protests that have emerged, right, regarding privacy rights on the blockchain, specifically because of the way Tornado Cash has been sanctioned. Why are people so passionate about maintaining the privacy in Web3?
Well, so money is the root of all evil, but it is also the root of all commerce. And so if you wanted to create a new internet, one that is owned by the people and preserves their privacy and gives them the ability to actually use the information system that we all now use to transmit all of our ideas and share all of our feelings in a way that actually preserves their own sanctity as individuals, then that system, this internet that we're trying to create, needs to be rooted in sound money. It needs to be rooted in privacy, and it has to have these core tenets. If it does not, then the privacy associated with that money and the lack of privacy will eventually lead to a lack of privacy down the line for all of the systems that come to bear. And so we cannot create a new internet that preserves your privacy, where your information and your personal actual life is preserved, where you can have the same kind of privacy online that you do offline, unless we can also preserve the privacy of the money behind that system. Economics is all based on this. We can't have a commercial entity online that has privacy if the back end of that system is completely open and
we're going to go to break. I appreciate what you're doing. We'll be back on the Daily Drop. Okay, we're back on the Daily Drop. So I'm gonna change this question. I'm gonna give you options because I know that you're gonna have something really intelligent to say here. So how do you think the privacy issue will ultimately be resolved on the blockchain, or how do you think it should be resolved?
So privacy online starts with having privacy of your money online. And so what we need to do here is to ensure that we are preserving people's civil liberties and their rights without causing people who are engaged in nefarious actions to have more advantages. I think what that means, and what I would think that most of the people in this industry understand, is that there are technologies that can be used to track all of the bad actions that are happening, even if Tornado Cash is being used. And that we should be investing more in those kinds of technologies rather than trying to suppress anything else that's innovative in the space. Just because you can have privacy about where your money goes doesn't mean that you are going to do something bad with that privacy. And I think we all need to accept that.
We've also seen an increase generally in government intervention during this latest crypto winter. Like, what other areas of the space do you see being targeted?
So there's a few different areas that are really frustrating at the moment. One of the major ones is the listing of different types of utility tokens. And so if you are launching a decentralized social network or something that's going to allow people to run computers in their homes, like Koii does, Koii allows an individual to take their computer and be able to offer that computer as compute resources to other people who want to run a decentralized network. This allows us to preserve privacy of your social media data, of your emails, of messages, anything that you want to build on top of this gigantic network of computers that we're putting together. These kinds of tokens now are being regarded as securities and a wide range of other things, but really the whole reason that they exist is so that an individual can share something with another person, similar to a ride-sharing app. And all of this is now quickly coming under fire because it means that if you want to build something that uses cryptocurrency at all, government regulators have decided that that is a crime. And they've decided that this whole technology stack that we're trying to build for a new internet is a nefarious system. Which is simply not true, and it goes against the entire fundamentals of what we've been working for the last 10 years since all this stuff started.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Like, how much intervention do you think governments and regulators should have at all over the lives of private citizens?
I would say very little, but if somebody's breaking the law or they're doing something that's going to hurt other people, then there absolutely has to be a line there. I think it's about governments looking for ways to do this in a fashion that is not going to inhibit the privacy or the freedoms of individuals that are not doing anything nefarious. And if we start to limit the freedoms of individuals who are truly just trying to live their lives in an effort to prevent nefarious activity by a select few, then that from every standpoint, that's just the wrong way to approach that. That's not the role of government. In fact, that sounds a lot like authoritarianism.
Okay, so what's the best compromise here? right? Because I can understand that people, don't want punitive regulations. People don't want to have innovation stifled. They don't want to be attacked for something they didn't do wrong. If you didn't launder money, why should you, associate with that? But what is a government to do? What is a regulator to do when they see the crimes happening?
I think our regulators should be working with other regulators. Any dollar that exists in crypto has to be spent in the real world. You can't just go and buy things in the crypto world. It wouldn't help you in your life. You can't go and buy a Lamborghini, as the crypto saying goes. You can't do that without actually showing up at a car dealership. And so when you do, no matter where you are in the world, there is a regulator there, and they can be sharing information with each other about who's purchasing what. That's entirely reasonable. And if someone shows up in another country and starts buying mansions, it's pretty clear that they hid some money from someone somewhere. And at that point, they can easily be held accountable for that, because it's pretty easy to ask them, where did you get this money? Just the fact that they use Tornado Cash at all, that doesn't really give them much anyways.
Okay, 30 seconds I'm going to give you, Al. How would you sum up everything about the direction of the space regarding privacy?
It's the whole reason it exists. That's it. Web3, blockchain, all of this stuff. The reason that it was invented is because the banking sector in 2008 effectively crashed the global economy, which led to the creation of Bitcoin. And as Bitcoin existed for longer and longer, more people saw how these kinds of trustless systems could work, where individuals can trust the technology instead of trusting a person who runs the technology or runs a company associated with it. And we're now trying to build an entire new internet that follows that doctrine and allows you to have all of the freedoms that you have in the real world while you're online. And this is an absolutely necessary thing for our society, because today the internet is everything.
Al, thank you for coming. I really appreciate your perspective. You're awesome.
Thanks very much.
While the Tornado Cash debacle started as yet another story of a blockchain company on the wrong side of the law, it has transmogrified into something much more significant. Now, laws need to be respected. People's hard-earned money needs to be protected. But how far should the government be allowed to go? What is the human cost of securing your money? We'll see you next time. Daily Draw.